You might not have known that, and that's part of the joke, I guess, is because security in eResearch it's never really had a place in eResearch, right? Even though it's always been there, it's never really had emphasis. It's never really had emphasis, and when it has had emphasis, it's kind of been wrong-handed, right? That's how we feel. So we're trying, at least in our environment, CER at University of Auckland, to come up with a more tiered, balanced approach that's more pragmatic and that is more beneficial to researchers and more enabling while being practical instead of roadblocking and corporate-y and stuff. So just a disclaimer, I thought this might be the only talk that doesn't have AI featured. It might change in a year or two, but this year there's no AI. So if that puts anybody off, feel free to leave. I won't be offended. So as it's pretty obvious, secure systems and research systems have always been orthogonal, right? The research is open source and collaborative, and it's always kind of viewed as low risk. It's not production-y. It's kind of ad hoc, and this program's made by a PhD student, who, he left 5 years ago, and somebody's trying to maintain the old code, and security is an afterthought, right? And then, it's kind of, we're hosted in large institutional, corporate, or public data centers and environments that are really kind of the ones exposed to the risk and the reputational harm. And so the knee-jerk reaction historically and to this day is kind of highly restrictive, to restrict by default, very process-heavy, very corporate sometimes, and inflexible. So why does it lag behind? A lot of these are really, really obvious, but there hasn't been much cybersecurity training in eResearch. This is the only talk at eResearch NZ. Probably a good thing there's not a bunch of security talks. It wouldn't attract a whole lot of people because it's not the most exciting thing, right? It's always been an afterthought in research, so it hasn't had priority. Legacy systems, it's that server under a desk kind of a thing that it works, so why change it and break it? Or this code, you probably should containerize it and make it reproducible and updatable, but not everything works, so we're not gonna change it. Patch management, that's always an afterthought. Trying to get researchers to do patch management on their own is always challenging, and they're researchers, right? Like it's not their wheelhouse really, and that's fair enough. Limited monitoring, again, it goes back to the kind of rogue, bespoke kind of solutions that they develop, which are amazing solutions, but they can go rogue. And then within the security teams, and this also goes within the eResearch teams, at least in our perspective, in our experience, there's kind of been an us and them mindset with the CISOs and deputy CISOs and security ops teams where it's they're super busy and you're super busy, and submit an ATO, an authority to operate, or a security review for this service or something, and you just get back, you get thrown a NIST manual or a some 800-page compliance document, and just make sure your thing complies with this. And there hasn't been much, and so I think that's really built a wall and prevented kind of a lot of discussion and training and advancement here. This is a really common kind of thing, XKCD for everything, they say, right? So, it's kind of in an evolution where you get more tools and they're closed off, but then people figure out ways to integrate them and make them more collaborative, and then they're less secure, and then it's a kind of, we're always kind of going through this cycle, I think. Would you like to?
Yeah, I'm happy to talk about this. So this is kind of with the token slide that, goes about how important security is. In terms of academia, and, we've talked about in research too, that it's kind of on the lower scale of importance compared to research and research outputs. Educase is a group in North America of about 2,000 higher education facilities. And they just look at IT trends throughout the world and try to provide good advice and learnings. Recently, they released a report like they do every year. They think cybersecurity is big and important. Yep. So this is kind of just a little summary of, yes, it's important. And, you know, in our area, we should remember that it's important. Looking at the figure of $6 million per data breach kind of makes you quiver a little bit. And it's one of those things we don't want to happen to us. There's another report that comes out of North America as well, Data Breach Investigations Report, very, very popular, been around for 20 years. They also look at the education sector as well. Some stats that came out, 2,000 security incidents, and they look at a lot of different, not just education, but just industry as well. I think they looked at about 10,000 data breaches in this report. One thing that was really interesting is that the number of the type of threat actor, being internal and external, is quite interesting. It's quite high, 32% internal. So that would be inside of a higher education facility. There's a kind of pretty graph to go with it. I think the kind of summary is, and I don't think it's very good for education either, is that the main ways that we have breaches in the sector is from intrusion and social engineering. And you look at other sectors and they're a little different. Intrusion is a bad one. That kind of speaks to like misconfiguration, bad default settings and stuff like that. So it's kind of good to keep in mind that it is important. Talking about the goal of what we want to do, we have kind of a lot of mid-tier virtual machines that we provide for researchers. We want to maintain open access collaboration top. That is our goal. There's no point in having these services if people cannot use them. But we want them secure, and we want to try and do a better job, and we want that balance, basically. And we also, like Sean said, we want to work with the other teams within the university and make sure we adhere to their standards and their processes. Would you like to talk about the...
Sure. This is kind of new, and we're kind of feeling this as we go along, right? So there might be some adjustments, and we're not saying that this is the way. But just kind of sharing what we're trialing out to kind of find this practical middle ground. Freedom and security in politics or IT are always kind of diametrically opposed and proportional if you have, or inversely proportional, right? If you have more freedom, you have less security and vice versa. So we've got, in one of our service offerings, we've got the Nectar cloud, which is highly self-service. Researcher can spin up a VM, and it's got public access, and they can, in theory, open it up to the world themselves. They can run any service they want, open any port. They can do that right now. So what we're kind of saying is, if there's a lot of use cases that need public access, there's a lot of web portals and collaborative tools that really need the ability to reach beyond University of Auckland even, to the greater world and share really important data and get people on. If that's your use case, then you're going to have a lot more responsibility and a lot more scrutiny over how you're running that VM. We still want to empower the researcher or the research teams to have that capability, and we're happy to give them training or feedback along the way in a helpful way. But ultimately, there's going to be more scrutiny if you've got more responsibility, which is kind of how I treat my 8-year-old a little bit, right? So it's kind of not calling researchers 8-year-olds, but boy. So we're moving to also a managed VM service. So not all researchers have a really tech-savvy person in their research group, and not all researchers want to learn how to open up ports and deal with firewalls and patching and things like this. So we'd like to have an option that that sits inside of the university border firewall. It's on the same platform as Nectar, but it's managed. So it's managed with university-approved tooling that's been signed off with ATOs and been certified and approved. That's puppetized, and it's got security agents that are installed and scanning, and not everyone has sudo or admin rights if it's Windows. It might just be one person that we kind of vet in the group that we know is responsible, and they can still install applications and get their work done. But the patching and the security is kind of behind the scenes, and they don't have to worry about it, right? And then kind of at the far end of this, we're developing, which Yvette is going to enlighten us after this. Hopefully you can all stick around for that. But something that we're developing this year, and it's the secure research environment. And it's for sensitive data. It's extremely locked down. So it's not collaborative, and you don't have the freedom, but it's highly, highly secure. And I won't steal Yvette's thunder with that. I'll just kind of say that this is just kind of how it looks architecturally. I used this in my previous talk, so I'm kind of reusing. But so we've got kind of the hub and spoke model of Nectar, where we've got core services in Melbourne, and it's possible that S3 storage lives in Melbourne, so it would be possible for a researcher accidentally to possibly, upload some data to Melbourne. Like I said, there's self-service VMs, so they could pull data off or open up ports or whatever. This is going to be a completely restricted zone. So it's like an availability zone in Amazon or OpenStack speak, and it's completely ring-fenced off. It contains all services internally, and it only talks out through very bespoke or very deliberate and very secure services for the minimal things that it needs to still be part of the federation and leverage the benefits of having the same Puppet environment, the same documentation environment, the same code review environment, and these things, right? But I won't steal Yvette's thunder anymore.
We'll this one, I think. So we're kind of moving towards we've got different options, don't we? But we still have a lot of VMs that are sitting around in Nectar Cloud that maybe have too much access, and we're kind of figuring out what do we want to do with them. And so we kind of changed the way we worked a little bit. And you'll probably see the word gently managed thrown around today, where we don't want to get too involved with what's happening, but just gently behind the scenes try to make things better without interrupting the most important thing, which is research. So a couple of things we've done is we're looking at tooling and processes. And one key point is the things in red we'll talk a little about in more detail, but we're automating a lot of stuff, and we're kind of integrating systems. We're talking to the OpenStack API. We're talking to we've got a vulnerability scanner, Tenable. We're talking to that API. We've got Freshdesk for ticketing. We're talking to those, and we're kind of integrating those and try to automate sending tickets, fixing problems, because there's too many machines that we can manually do. We're also updating our processes. We do this already, just we never wrote it down. So we're kind of moving to a more formalized approach. So when kind of using this word gently managed, because it's supposed to be, when we're talking about Nectar Cloud, the one that's got a lot of freedom but not much security, people want that freedom and we want them to have it, but we also don't want it's exposing University of Auckland IP addresses. We are the owners. There could be research data on. We want to make sure it's safe, basically. So we're doing a lot of things that are very rudimentary in terms of security, but low-hanging fruit. We're setting up these VMs, so out of the box, you get SSH keys. You don't use password authentication. Security updates, they're configured to be default. We've got rate limiting on when you authenticate, to try and, plug these little holes. And these are things that won't really upset researchers. The fail to ban rules we've got for rate limiting are very, very easy. You would have to perform an attack almost to get kicked out, which is the point. So we're not making it super strict. We're trying to make it usable. Another thing that's really key to our success, and this is kind of like a sharing of what we learned, is about tagging a lot of stuff. We have a cloud with a lot of VMs. Who knows who owns them? You have to look up the VM, then you have to cross-look up the owner. Where are they from? What department? So we started to do things like tag things. What operating system is it running? What ports are exposed to the world? So we've got a few examples here. The list of tags looks quite long. That's because we've added heaps because it makes our job way easier. So we can say there should be one in there that says visibility. And in this case, visibility is none because it's in a private network and it can't see out. So we look at the security groups that are attached to it and try and work that out. We try to figure out what ports are open. This one, none. So this is good, but there's also some bad things. Which operating system version is it? We can see kind of up around here, Ubuntu 18.4. And we can start using all this information to make decisions, basically. And if we kind of move to the next slide, actually I'll just skip one. We'll stick with this one. with this data and the tagging, basically we can do things like look at all our VMs. So this is an example from that ranges from about the 7th month of last year till now. And every week we look at what VMs we have, and we're looking at if a security agent is installed on them. And you can kind of see that it's gone from red, no, security agent, green, it has one. So we can kind of see that trend. And it's very difficult to install these. All these machines are different. We might not have access. They might be in a private network. But it shows that we can track it. We track all that with tagging. So we tag them when we got the agent, we update it, and we can see this nice information. And we also do a lot of other scanning in the background, trying to figure a gentle way to find vulnerabilities that are actually important to send to the researcher. Because if you've seen a security scan, you probably get 1,000 results and none of them are very important. So that's kind of one of our next steps. Here's another example of kind of how we use tagging and metrics. If we look middle of last year, all our instances, so if you kind of add up the ones at the bottom, we've got about 400 instances at that time, June last year. And this is looking at end-of-life systems. So we had a few that were on there because, it's a research cloud computing platform. And we tag all these, we automatically send out tickets, we talk to researchers. One of the key things we learned was that it's that kind of, not face-to-face because it's obviously over email or over a ticketing system, but they get a response from a human, and we started to get some really good results. So obviously the blues got them bigger. We're running a lot of supported systems. The two resolved little bit is we also implement other sort of risk mitigation factors. We put them into like a little network bubble so they can't talk out. And we can kind of see that we've actually done a difference by like looking at our tags, looking at our metrics, and kind of see that difference. The last thing is kind of the gently managing is process. And process is, I left working in the private sector for a reason. This is one of them, because they can be very, very difficult. We've got an example here of if we have a VM or our underlying infrastructure, if we have some sort of vulnerability, is it critical? Is it high? Is it a machine that's exposed to the internet? This is the time frame that we need to fix it by. So we've started to write this stuff down and then try to follow up with making sure that we meet these requirements. And we also do one for researcher VMs. We try to make them a little more flexible. It depends as well what's exposed to the internet, what's not exposed. But it gives us a goal and a way to measure success as well. And I absolutely hate this. I remember when writing these things, I remember when I did it, I sent it to Sean, and he said, "Oh, that's great. You must have loved writing that." And he said, and I'll quote, "I assume this one wasn't fun to write. If it was fun, I'm sure we're not friends." And I do agree, because even looking at these tables is a lot to take in. Future, do you want to finish this up, Sean?
Yeah, sure. So that's what we don't want. I mean, it's kind of joking that a secure system is one that's powered off and has the network cable unplugged, right? We want to find that middle ground, and we want it to be secure but still useful. And the primary goal here, again, is always to support researchers, to enable research first, and then also raising the capability of the researcher as far as awareness and practices, how they can patch, manage, and be aware of this, and help them along the way, right? I think that's it.
All right, any questions for Sean and Tom? Yeah?
Yeah, thank you. Do you feel that you've seen changes in the sort of mindset of the researchers that you're interacting with? Because I'm speaking, obviously, as a sort of researcher myself, I've felt that my experience is a bit that the interference that security posed previously is fading a bit now that people appreciate that they're still pressed for time. They can't get the time to do these things, but it's more likely to be a mission, an accident. People have a better understanding that there is actually a real risk in terms of systems having these sorts of problems. Is that something that you're seeing in the researcher community, a sort of shift in the attitudes?
I think so. And like one interesting parallel in this maturity kind of journey is is sensitive data and data sovereignty, and that goes along with security, right? And I think that as they're becoming aware of how critical it is to secure their data, it goes hand in hand with they're all of a sudden not opposed to, okay, my data is really important and I've signed these ethics agreements. I also really need to learn about this because it's important. So I certainly have seen that. Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think no one is ever upset about the situation. It's just it's a time thing. And I think that's a shift from maybe when I used to be in academia. So I think, yeah, it has improved.
So